Everybody, welcome to FoxNews.com live, and what perfect timing to launch a legal show today, because in 15 minutes there will be an announcement as to the verdict, the fate of Casey Anthony, facing capital murder charges, the death penalty in a courtroom in Florida. We await the decision of those jurors. What will they decide? They have a number of options, and I'm joined here by Dr. Michael Bottom. We were just talking about this morning, saying whether or not we thought that they would be able to reach a verdict this quickly in the case, and Dan Schorr, Inspector General for Yonkers, New York, and former criminal prosecutor, so former DA like myself. Let me get your initial reaction as to what you think we're going to hear at 2:15. Everybody's even calling me and asking me what I think. What do you think?
You know, I've been there waiting for a jury, never in a case this high profile, but I know the tension, and you never know what a jury's going to do. You would think they're going to convict on something here, something significant, whether it's the murder one, the death penalty eligible count. It's hard to tell. All
right, Dr. Biden.
I had thought it would not be a death penalty, but it came with that coming back so quickly. I think makes me think that's a possibility. I think they didn't really go through the scientific evidence, which I think
like they should have. You're saying,
which I
depending
think would
on what
show
the verdict
flaws.
is,
yeah,
they may not come back on a first degree, right? Which first degree would be either two ways to get there, which would be the premeditated, deliberate, intentional killing that way, or through a felony murder charge that they've also been, they also charged her with. Even the lesser counts, though, she's looking at 30 years behind bars. That's the thing. That's what people don't realize. Even just for the child abuse charges, lying to the authorities, all of that, she's looking at a significant period of time. I think a lot of people are quite surprised in that they didn't ask for any readback. They didn't ask to see any exhibits. They didn't ask for any kind of playback whatsoever, or even a question about the charges.
It is surprising because everyone who's been commentating on the case has been talking about all the DNA evidence and other scientific evidence, and here the jury just went through, reached a verdict the next day, and it's going to be interesting to see what they come out with.
Yeah, it sounds to me it's more they're going with the emotional evidence rather than the scientific evidence would require looking into. But I must say that O.J. Simpson, remember?
I was just going to ask you about that case that you're very familiar with.
4 hours they came back with a not guilty. So,
you know,
that's very unusual.
It is very unusual. And at the courthouse, when you usually have a verdict that's that quick, you worry. I remember one time I had a verdict in 20 minutes, and I thought, oh, no. Tell me I did not lose this case. And, you know, it ended up being guilty. But real quick turnaround would usually be a not guilty. I don't think so in this case. She's going to go down on some of it, at least half of it, probably even on the aggravated child abuse. We'll see what they say. But let's take a listen, because I thought the rebuttal by the prosecutor, by Ms. Burdick, was really powerful, and I think we have that ready. Not yet. Okay, we'll take a listen to that later, because I really felt the prosecutor did a great job of laying that out and nailing it in terms of simplifying to the jury, saying even if you think that Casey Anthony gave her little daughter Kaylee a little bit of chloroform and that killed her, that's felony murder, with the basis of it being aggravated child abuse.
Right. They certainly explained to the jury very clearly, if you find aggravated child abuse led to the death of this victim, then you should find murder in the first degree. And that was very persuasive. They also showed in the summations, the prosecution, that there really was no one else who had motive to kill this little girl.
Whose life is better now.
Exactly. And they ended very powerfully with those images of her partying in the bar and the tattoo that said "beautiful life." And the jury, I believe, is going to convict, because if you find aggravated child abuse, you probably will find the murder, because you know that led to the death.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's take a listen to the prosecutor in the rebuttal. Here's Ms. Burdick.
Whose life was better? That's the only question you need to answer in considering why Kaylee Marie Anthony was left on the side of the road dead. There's your answer.
What a powerful image of the tattoo at the end of her partying, and then next to it, the tattoo, the good life, Bella Vita. Very powerful. That in the 31 days.
And you're really saying an innocent person does not behave like this. And that's very, very powerful when you're trying to convince a jury that this defendant is guilty.
Okay, we've got Jessica Zone ready for us in Orlando with the very latest. Jessica, thanks for joining us.
Hi there, Kimberly. How are you?
So what's going on? Is it a pretty crazy scene down there?
Well, we have seen the public just start to flock to the to the courthouse. Rather, about 1:30, the people, those 50 lucky people who were allowed to be in the courtroom when the verdict is read, they were ushered in. And again, we're waiting about 5 minutes from now. We should be hearing that verdict ourselves. Just in the last couple of minutes, we saw Casey Anthony come in with a long ponytail, pursed lips. She was biting her fingers, biting her lips a little bit. Jose Baez, her defense attorney, coming over to talk to her, kind of calm her down. We saw a reassuring hand on her shoulder. And we've actually seen a bunch of the prosecution witnesses come in for this reading of the verdict. People from the FBI, from the Orange County Sheriff's Office, even the tech who combed over Casey's trunk 12 times to get that chloroform evidence, to look for those stains we heard about in testimony. All of them in the courtroom. We've also seen George Anthony, Casey's father, and her mother, Cindy George, holding his Bible in his hands, praying. Cindy, very quiet beside him. George actually brought some tissues as well. It seems that they're very prepared for whatever is coming next in terms of the emotional nature. Again, these jurors are looking at 7 charges against Casey Anthony, the most serious of which is capital murder. She is on trial for her life here, Kimberly, as you well know. And they can consider as well 3 lesser included charges for that capital murder charge. But this verdict is back within 9 hours. There was not a single question from the jury, not a single readback of testimony or looking at evidence again. So it seems that they reached those unanimous conclusions on each of the 7 counts pretty quickly here.
Yeah, it really does seem that way. I think a lot of us are very surprised having tried these cases. I've tried death penalty cases. I haven't had one come back this quick. All right, Jessica, we'll come to you later if we get a chance and see what the verdict is in this case. Thank you so much for joining us outside the courtroom in Orlando, Florida. My pleasure. Okay, so you saw that 9 hours, Dr. Bodden, that quickly they were able to come back and render a verdict. I think that the prosecutor giving the powerful rebuttal at the end might have really been what cemented it for the jury.
I would agree. I think that in order to look at the science, which is not the emotional part of it, takes a longer time. And a lot of people get convicted on the emotional aspects of what they do. And this was just
Because in order to believe that she chloroformed her little girl, you needed that evidence to show that there was chloroform, right?
Yeah, but
in the air in the trunk and the searches.
Yeah, but see, my problem with it, from a forensic science point of view, is the only one who found chloroform was this Arpad Voss, who used a machine that nobody else has ever used. The one time it was used to look for bodies in Charlie Manson's place, it was a big flop.
It's highly unusual.
He
uses
divining rods, he uses coat hangers, and I think that it is not verified science.
And there's a live shot of the courtroom in Orlando, Florida, where you see the defendant, Casey Anthony, looking at the death penalty in this case. And in just 4 short minutes from now, we anticipate that we will hear the verdicts from this jury as Judge Perry reads them out loud. In the meantime, what he's doing is checking the forms, making sure everything's correct and not inconsistent in terms of the jury verdicts, that they're signed, that everything is appropriate before he reads it and enters it into evidence. Right, Dan?
Absolutely. There's nothing in the world like waiting for a verdict.
Oh, it's the worst.
You're sitting in court, you have no idea, and for the defendant, she may find out that she's going to be subject to the death penalty, or she could be acquitted and be out soon. Her whole life is on the line, and all the work they've done, the justice for the victim here, it's all going to be revealed within a matter of minutes.
You know, you bring up a great point. There is the possibility people didn't think the O.J. Simpson case, that was going to be a not guilty. Could you have a big surprise here?
It's hard to see that based on the way the case was presented. I think the defendant made a lot of tactical mistakes. They set up a defense based on drowning and sexual abuse that didn't seem
that they didn't have to commit themselves to.
They didn't have to commit themselves to. Their closing argument accused everyone in the world of lying or acting improperly. Her parents, the person who found the body. They said the prosecutors just wanted a big win. The police ignored leads of an accident. It's hard to believe that all these people came together to frame or ignore evidence that would have led Casey Anthony off the hook. And if that is true, then she's just the most unlucky person on the planet. It's just hard to believe.
Well, in all fairness, I mean, every time you look at an innocent person who's been let out of jail because the DNA proves they were innocent, everybody came together also. It's amazing how the medical exam and the police and all may focus in on the guilty aspects of somebody, and sometimes they're all mistaken.
Right.
I think this smelling of
well, you bring up a great point, though, about the appellate issues in terms of the forensic science and whether it was readily accepted in the scientific community. From everything you're telling me, and you are one of the foremost experts in the world in terms of scientific forensic evidence, you're saying not so much.
Yeah, I think that they've opened up a big area of appeal that'll take.
That's the big issue, more than the Miranda. The Miranda was about whether she worked at Universal Studios. Yes. The scientific evidence is the chloroform, which directly ties her to aggravated child abuse or felony murder.
2 years ago, the National Academy of Sciences came in with a report critical of forensic science. Justice Scalia used that to base the Melendez decision about forensic science, that it has to be improved. The report wants to make the judge a better gatekeeper. What Perry did was ignore all of that, and when the defense tried to introduce that as an authoritative document, he wouldn't accept it as an authoritative document, even though Justice Scalia and the Supreme Court has. So it'll be interesting to see if this ever gets up to the Supreme Court, how it's the appeal would be. It
certainly has issues that would be appropriate to make it all the way up to the Supreme Court. Okay, let's take a look and review again for this trial the counts and the possible sentences and overview as a guidance for the charges. Of course, count 1, first-degree murder. You're looking at a possibility of death or life. It can either be through premeditation, as we discussed, or through a theory of felony murder, meaning during the commission, the course of certain enumerated felonies, and a death occurs, you will still be held to a first-degree murder charge. Now, lesser, there is a second-degree murder, which is 16 years to life. In order to convict of a second-degree murder, it is not necessary for the state to prove the defendant intentionally caused the death of the little girl. So in this particular case, it would be an act that is imminently dangerous to another and demonstrating a depraved mind. We see a live shot of the courtroom. Casey Anthony's been directed to stand by the judge. She's now sitting back down, rising, I guess, because the judge has entered the courtroom. Let's listen in to Judge Perry.
Both sides ready to proceed. It's been brought to my attention that the jury has reached a verdict. State?
The state's ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Defense?
Defense is ready.
To those in the gallery, please do not express any signs of approval or disapproval upon the reading of the verdict. Let's return to jury.